everyone, and welcome to the Talk That Hear You podcast. What Parents Are Saying, Prevention Wisdom, Authenticity, and Empowerment. I'm Debbie Burnt, Director of Parent Movement 2.0, and I'll be your host. Today, we're going to actually talk about the Talk They Hear You campaign and a really useful new tool that was rolled out last year called the Parent Night Out presentation. We have two wonderful community members that are joining us today. Lindsay Wright, who is a public health nurse in Massachusetts, and Charles Schultz, also in that public health department in Massachusetts. In addition to working in this department together, both Chris and Lindsay are parents, and Chris is actually the scoutmaster of the local Boy Scout troop. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing well,
Great.
thank you.
Great. So the Talk They Hear You campaign is designed for parents, but it's also designed for people in public health like yourselves to use or to bring to parents. So both of you check all the boxes that Talk They Hear You is designed for and targeted to, and we're really excited and appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. So we start every episode asking our guests to tell us the ages of their kids, because we want that to be part of the discussion. And then tell us a little bit more about each of your jobs in the health department.
My children are 5 and 10 years old. I have two girls. And then my job in the health department is, as the public health nurse, I'm responsible for infectious disease tracking, following infectious disease trending, case management, case investigation, as well as vaccination, documentation of vaccination, as well as public outreach for various different education opportunities, such as substance abuse, blood pressure clinics, diabetes management. We do a lot of emergency management things, emergency preparedness, to name a few.
That's great. It's amazing how much happens in a public health space inside of community. Thank you. Chris, tell us about you.
I have two children, 19 and 16, and I also work in the public health department. I am the health agent, sort of responsible for inspecting food establishments, body art, tanning, septic systems, private wells, environmental hazards. We oversee trash, just pretty much anything that you can think of that encompasses health in the community.
Fantastic. So I want to know how you kind of found the Talk They Hear You campaign, and when did you do the Parent Night Out presentation?
The Parent Night Out presentation we did on May 11th, I believe it was. We decided back in the early spring of last year that we wanted to do something during Mental Health and Substance Abuse Week to bring awareness, have an in-person kind of try to get the community involved and have as many individuals a part of the conversation as we could. I was able to find this program and thought it would be an amazing fit for our community, where it was more of a conversation as opposed to this is what we should be doing. It was definitely a dialogue that I wanted to have and thought that it would be a welcomed dialogue because of the conversational piece to it. So we promoted it from early spring, and in May we were able to have the program, and it was very successful.
That's great. And we're talking 2022?
Correct.
You were able to do? Okay.
Yeah.
So we also had moved out of the COVID space, and
Yes.
and you could bring people together. Did you have an online component to it as well, or was it just in person?
So we wanted it to be in person to allow for that two-way conversation. And then in partnering with our local cable access media, we were able to record the session and have it streamed on their local cable access media, as well as play repeatedly back and available online as well.
It's so great. So really covered a lot of media avenues in
Yes.
the process. That's great. Did you and Chris work together on it in the beginning, or how did it? What role did you play, Chris?
I was moral support. Yeah, this was Lindsay's baby.
It's important. Were you both at the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And approximately how many people do you think attended?
There's about 20 in the audience, give or take.
Okay. And I would say that numbers on these types of events, one shouldn't get too hung up on. 20 people showing up is a huge accomplishment on an event like this. Who all did you advertise to, or who were you promoting to and urging to attend?
Any parent of school-age children or parent of anyone of any age, but we really targeted that school-age child, K through 12. We utilized the school's mass distribution list to advertise. We utilized social media, our mass distribution lists, flyers in the library, kind of all avenues. And we definitely had a wide variety of individuals show up.
It's amazing. Do you have any metrics on the digital stuff, either the streaming or views since the event?
The last I saw, the YouTube version of it had over 200 views. And the director over at the studio had said that he can keep track of the metrics of who is watching. It had been a very popular program.
That's awesome. And I think this is one of those topics where it has a ripple effect. So you have parents that participate and see it firsthand, and then the conversations start with their spheres of influence and their parenting peers. Did you get a sense that was probably the case?
I'd like to think so, absolutely. I know that still being aired on a local cable channel inside of our town. I just had an elderly woman tell me she saw me on TV the other day giving a great speech.
Awesome.
I think she missed the point of the conversation that we were having. But I'll chalk that up to her hearing loss due to her age. But it's still airing, and so I'm still getting questions about it, and it's still being brought up and discussed.
Fantastic.
And I do know that I've had questions come up from parents who were not in attendance. So yeah, we're seeing the ripple effect of it. Yeah.
That's awesome. For anyone listening to us, the Parent Night Out program is linked in the description of this podcast if anyone wants to go directly to it. But let's just talk a little bit about the content of the Parent Night Out presentation. You don't have to remember it all verbatim, but did you recall if anything in particular resonated louder for some parents or for yourselves? What parts did you find that were the most important to you?
The statistics. And I don't remember specifically explaining it to kids that way, that just because one of your friends is choosing to do something that is not the best of options, you still have others who are making strong choices. You know, one person doesn't have to not ruin it, but influence you to do something negative. And so that stood out.
We call that social norming. You guys probably do as well. That, and especially with drugs and alcohol, I don't know why it is, but everyone thinks everyone is using, and every teen thinks every one of their friends is using. Every parent thinks every teen is using. And when you look at the statistics, there's a lot of kids that really are not. And the tricky thing about that, though, is if you are in a friend group, or if you have a child and you're in a parent group where the kids are using, it feels like everyone's using. So it doesn't really matter what that statistic is. You know, your reality feels different. Did you guys feel like the brain health part of it resonated for people? It's becoming more common. It's not as commonly understood as I wish, but the fact that teenage brain development is really dynamic at this time and really affected by substances. Did you feel like that message got through?
Absolutely. And also the question and answer portion, where the honesty part of, if your kids ask, well, you did it, why was it okay for you? We can turn around and say, well, we didn't know. We have now 30 years more research. And what we have learned in those 30 years is that it is not good. It's detrimental to brain health. And we can actually use evidence-based scientific fact to support our answer of, just because I did it doesn't mean you should. And not just be the parent and said, well, because I said so. I know when I was a kid, because I'm your mom and I said so, that wasn't good enough. I wanted to know the reasons why, and
Yeah.
this provides the evidence-based scientific reasoning of, well, here's why.
Yeah.
So that definitely resonated.
Awesome. The other thing I think is interesting is it talks about how much influence we actually have as parents. And I might ask Chris how that resonated for you, because I feel like the older our kids get, the less influence we feel like we have because they're masters at telling us we don't have any. But in reality, there is a tremendous amount. So do you find that to be true in your parenting, Chris, and or how do you feel like your parenting peers feel about that?
I'd like to think that's the case. It's difficult when you're in the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah.
In fact, my 16-year-old just told me the other day that I'm not your baby anymore. So shut up, Dad. But I think it does get through, and I've noticed actually probably more in my role as a scout leader, because these are other people's kids I'm dealing with. But I've seen over a period of time things that we've said to them early on do actually get in there and stick. So.
Yeah, it's one of those things we have to just go on faith as parents, because I hear you about the trenches. I have older kids, I have 18 to 27, and yeah, I cannot tell you how many times they told me, not useful, not helpful, Mom, not doing the right thing. And in retrospect, they've come back and be like, yeah, maybe you're right about that marijuana thing. Yeah, maybe. And then wrong about stuff too. I've heard a whole earful over Thanksgiving about everything I did wrong too. So I mean, it's not it's not easy. It's not perfect, but the fact that they will hear us is something to remember. Did you guys talk about the mobile app at all in your presentation? I think it's part of the
Yes.
presentation.
Yep.
Yeah. For our listeners, Talk They Hear You has this mobile app that is just crazy cool, where you download it and you can practice talking to your kids about this topic, and also has lots of resources and different things in it as well. But just to take the edge off of, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to say it, or I don't know how I sound when I'm saying it. So did you guys talk about that, and had anyone tried it, or what did you think?
Yeah, we talked about it. I had grabbed some screenshots of the app, as well as the presentation itself provides some, and we used it as the conversation starters. And I know for sure some parents had downloaded it that night and practiced that night using it to see how it would feel to start a conversation. Is it going to be awkward? What do I do? How, where, when, where? And a lot of those questions came up, like how do I bring this up? And it became a support group almost of encouragement, and just do it. This is what we're going to do, and you're just going to just start it anytime, anywhere. Just, they'll hear you. Just start talking.
Yeah, having a parenting peer group. Do either of you have that? Parents of your kids' friends that you're in conversation with at all?
I don't.
Yeah.
My kids are young enough that a lot of their friends' parents I'm friends with, so kind of by default,
Right.
just bouncing ideas off of each other. But it's more because of their age, and it's kind of one of those, it just sort of happened.
Yep. And it sort of dissipates when they get older, and right, and they go off, and friend groups change, and that's always hard, because you're like, I love that parent, but you guys aren't friends anymore. So okay. So just real quickly, I know you guys had a really difficult situation in your community that happened after the presentation. And I'm really just curious if you think the Parent Night Out presentation helped at all in that situation. So, whatever you can tell me to get to that answer.
Yeah. So,
to hear.
a few nights after we held the presentation, we had a very tragic event unfold, and we lost one of our students through a very tragic accident. And the community definitely felt the effects of it. Everyone felt the effects of it. And I had a parent reach out and thank me, because this parent had attended the presentation and was able to use the just be honest with your kids portion and messaging that we pushed and encouraged and were very supportive of parents using with their children, because as everyone knows, honesty will always gain trust, and with trust anything can be done. This family was able to sit down together and discuss this tragic accident without using giant brushstrokes. They were able to talk about what happened in detail and in depth, and not skip over the really sad parts, and not skip over um, why things happened the way they did. And so this mom felt empowered after being at the talk a few days prior, and had reached out to our office and let us know that without us putting this presentation on, it probably wouldn't have happened with her family the way it did. And she wouldn't have been able to support her children in the way she did.
I mean, nothing helps at tragic times. Nothing solves it. But that's really so encouraging to hear that there was at least that positive or that usefulness of the program.
Yeah, again, it was such a tragic situation, but to find the silver lining in that we gave at least one family the ability and the strength to support their children was heartwarming. What was a message to talk about, substance abuse and alcohol, not using it underage, also gave parents the tools to talk about other hard topics, which was just an incidental effect of the talk that we had given, but turned out to be so helpful in such a time of need. So that was a special moment for me professionally, to be able to inadvertently offer that support.
Right. And I'm guessing doing the work that you do, you might not always see the direct connection or get that direct feedback loop.
Exactly.
I could see that being really powerful. Kind of just more in general, do either of you have any parenting tactics that you've used with your kids relative to drugs and alcohol? Obviously, Lindsay, your kids are younger. We always talk about age appropriate conversations. And then, Chris, yours are older. Any thoughts or comments along those lines? Things that have worked, things that haven't?
Hmm. It's hard to say. Like, I know with my kids, I've done a lot of messaging. I've tried to have frank and open conversations with them. With one of the kids, that seems to have worked well. With the other one, hasn't. But I think one of the things that my takeaway from this program was the day that you go into your kid's room and you find a bong, it's too late to have that conversation. And I think most parents are probably not prepared to talk to their kids before they're reacting to a situation. And one of the tools that I picked up on this was, at least now knowing the opportunity to start those conversations before and get the wheels turning before you get to the point where you're reacting to it. So
Right.
that has helped a bit. I'd like to say I had some magic thing myself, but other than just trying to be frank with my kids and remind them that I do know what I'm talking about from time to time,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was helpful.
Well, and just that message that comes across when you're talking to your kids, that I do not want this for you, is so powerful. And I think we get a little stuck in, if I tell my kids not to do something, that's just going to make them go do it more. And that does not bear out at a population level. Sure, there are kids that are just going to be like, I'm doing everything the opposite of what you tell me. Those kids are out there. But from a population level, we see that if your kids know you do not want this for them, you are not okay, it does have an influence. And finding the ways to say that through honest conversation, through I do know what I'm talking about, through the sharing experiences, things that you've seen as a parent, it's just really powerful. How about you, Lindsay, from a younger standpoint? Do you find yourself talking much about drugs and alcohol, or do you find yourself focusing more on resilience? How is it happening for you?
So If it comes up, we talk about it. It's not something that we'll just bring up to bring up. We live in a state that allows for recreational marijuana use. And with that comes a lot of recreational marijuana shops. And something that I, for the longest time, thought was not allowed was billboards. And now they're allowed. And so I get asked all the time, what is cannabis and what's marijuana? And I say, oh, it's a drug. And well, what does it do? A long time ago, when my oldest was super young, a toddler herself, and started asking all these questions, I made a decision that the only way that I was ever going to do anything with her was through honesty. And so going back 8.5, 9 years ago, I have always told her the truth. And so when she asks what drugs are, I say it can be either medicine that a doctor prescribes, or it can be something that you buy that, if it's legal, like marijuana, or not, but it can make you feel funny and if taken the wrong way. And we go into all the details, of course, being a inquisitive mind. She wants to know what feels funny means. And I spin her around a couple times and have her try to walk and say, that's what feels funny means. And she's like, I don't like that. Perfect. And so, again, it's the age appropriate description of what we're trying to talk about. She, when I was little, if I had a glass of wine in my hand, she would say, oh, what's that? And you know what? Rather than saying it's not for you, it's a mama drink. When you're a mama, you can have one. And that way, again, it's not the temptation of you're not allowed. It's just not allowed yet. And just choosing certain words and phrases to make it so that it's not taboo and that it's not this explicit, not allowed, off limits thing. And it just makes it for a more open, and again, it's the honesty and the trust between us and the kids that allow us to talk about anything. And we recently had a family member who chose to stop drinking. We have a lot of friends who have made a choice to stop drinking because of issues, but it's not a bad thing. It's encouraged and supported, and it's not like this tragic, oh my God, alcohol's gone. It's just another choice that we're making to be healthy. And so there was no stigma involved with any of it. It's just another decision that was made and been honest with the kids about.
That's so powerful. Yeah. I mean, if things are changing around a child and being able to explain it in a no stigma, just matter of fact kind of way, it sounds really powerful.
Yeah.
It might inform them for a long time. It's great. So, Lindsay, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about implementation of the program. How easy was it? How difficult was it in your mind and in your experience?
It was such an easy program to roll out. And then for me, being the one who did the presentation and was there to answer the questions, it was a very seamless process from announcing it to advertising it to rolling it out, and then to being there to do the follow-up of the questions that came as a result of the program. The online tools, everything made it so simple to roll out. And I felt supported. Having never met you, I felt so supported through the whole process because everything was right there that I needed.
I feel like we have covered the program and the experience that you guys had. It sounds like it was really effective. Any other comments about just this topic in general about parenting, alcohol and drugs, or keeping kids safe, or changing the narrative in the community from, oh, it's just kids will be kids, it's just a rite of passage, to no, really, you should not be drinking, you should not be using drugs in high school for sure. Any other thoughts along any of these lines?
Absolutely. My thought process is start with the parents and inform the parents about it's not everyone. It's not everything's not bad. You don't need to assume that your kid's doing something bad. As someone who didn't do anything illicit growing up, who didn't drink underage, but was accused of it because, and I quote, everyone was doing it. That was hurtful. I genuinely tried to be a good kid, and to be thrown into the loop of, well, if everyone's doing it, you must be too. No, I really wasn't. I promise. Really trust and have those conversations with your kids. If they're genuinely not, they'll let you know. And if you have those early on conversations, again, my girls are 5 and 10, and they come to me for everything. Sometimes a little bit too much. There are some days that I don't need to know everything that they tell me, but they come and tell me, and it's awesome. They're that comfortable with me. And I hope that that never ends. And so it starts with parents being informed and educated and open and honest. And then the next step for me in our community is I want to get the kids involved, and I want to know, what do they want us to know? What will be helpful for them? We can sit back and jump on our soapbox and say this, and this, and we can present all this evidence-based fact to their parents and to them. But what do they want? What's their side? What do they want from us? How can we actually help them as opposed to direct them?
Right. That's really a great way to think about this. I guess I want to ask Chris, do you ever have these conversations with your teens in the Boy Scout troop? Do they ever want to talk about this subject?
We do sort of touch on these things in a few different areas. There's not a lot of one-on-one conversations about this because BSA kind of takes an approach where certain things are left to parents. But honestly, there's a lot of opportunity to increase this. And I remember thinking about this that night, but now that we're talking about the program more, that this might be something we want to offer up in a scouting environment too, both for adult leaders and parents, because these are the places, the kids are talking about it. You want to make them feel comfortable enough to have those conversations with us.
That's a great idea. Finding groups of parents that you can talk specifically to, that makes a ton of sense. There's no badge on substance use, is there?
And not specifically, no, but it is part of their rank advancement to at least know some of the things out there. But you're also talking about a 100-year-old program, so it's not quite as progressive as we'd like.
Yeah. Just thinking program note, the Talk They Hear You merit badge that we've put together. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been a pleasure talking with you both. We don't get to dive real deep with people that use the program, so this is really a special opportunity for us. Is there anything else before I let you guys go?
I don't think so. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about our experience using the program and what a benefit it has been for our community. It's been amazing.
So thank you. I really appreciate it. Anything else?
Yeah, thank you.
We appreciate both of you being with us today and want to remind listeners that the Talk They Hear You material included in this podcast can be found on the Talk They Hear You website, which is Talk They Hear You, all spelled out, no spaces, at SAMHSA.gov. SAMHSA is SAMHSA.gov. Please share the site and this podcast with your friends. The more we can be in conversation with each other, the better for everyone, especially our kids. Lastly, we would like to hear from you. Would you like to be on our show? Do you have stories to share or tips or techniques that have worked or not worked for you as a parent? Do you have questions for us or any feedback on topics or improvements of any kind? We know that your input will help us design the most useful interviews possible. Please contact us at WhatParentsAreSaying@gmail.com for any of this. Again, all spelled out, WhatParentsAreSaying@gmail.com. This podcast is brought to you by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, also known as SAMHSA. Talk They Hear You is a national prevention campaign that aims to help parents and caregivers talk with their kids about the dangers and risks of underage drinking and other drug use. As a reminder, the views expressed here are not necessarily those of SAMHSA or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.